Good evening, good afternoon, wherever you are. Welcome to the Imagine Alkebulan Awakening series again. Today, you know what? We've got a explosive. I say explosive. We've got a very interesting lineup for you today. We're going to be talking about African spirituality. Before we go any further into our conversation, I'm gonna, as always, gonna introduce myself and my sister, my co-host, and then our guest. So, as you all know, my name is Oladile Dosimum. I am the co-founder of the Akebulan, Emerging Akebulan. I was going to say Awakening series. Excuse my language. Yeah, I get so excited, man. So basically, we're here to decolonize the minds and basically change the mindsets of our African people. My sister, if you want to go.
Hello, everyone. I am so blessed, feeling so blessed to have Mama Khanyisile with us today. I have been looking forward to this day. The name is Nduko Mulumba, an African to the core, returning to my African consciousness and shedding the colonialism and Western mentality off of my system. Yes, happy to be here for this conversation.
Okay, to our special guest, our sister, if you want to introduce yourself and if you want to say a little bit about yourself, and then we can go straight into the conversation.
Thank you, Oladele, for the invitation, and thank you, Nduku, for being with us. I am Dr. Khanyisile, two surnames Litchfield Tsabalala. It turns out that the Nguni people in South Africa, Nguni is Xhosa, Zulu, Ndebele, and Swati. Pre-colonially, the women never changed their surnames upon marriage. So I think that's why in South Africa, you'll see most Nguni women are resorting to the double barrel surname. So yes, I'm happy to be here.
Okay, if you want to tell us a little bit about yourself, and then, like we said, we're talking about African spirituality. The reason why we chose this topic and the reason why we have our guest today is basically because, as our Kebel, I'm just going to give you the context of why we're going about this conversation. As Africans, as Alkebulans, we tend to define ourselves based on the European context. As Africans, we are, we say Alkebulan, we are mother of mankind. We were the first, we were there before anybody else. And for some reason, we've taken ourselves away from our original spirituality to embrace borrowed systems, some things that are not necessarily ours. So what my sister's going to do, she's going to go into that. And then once we're going to have a little background, she's going to give us a little chat about African spirituality. And then we're going to welcome questions. I've had my own questions. My sister has her own questions. And then if there's any questions from the audience, you can send them in. We'll read them out to her. But my sister's going to go straight into what is African spirituality, my sister. Because basically we cannot define ourselves based on the European concept, which a lot of us do.
So you said introduce yourself. I always find it so hard to talk about myself. I feel like I'm wasting time instead of talking about the subject matter. So I think my history is on Google. For those who are interested, they can find it there. I think the first disclaimer I want to make talking about African spirituality is that none of us living in 2023 can claim to have found a pure, unadulterated form of African spirituality. We are all on a journey to finding it. And why is that? Because I was calculating Islam descended, and I use the word descended on purpose because they were not invited. Islam descended upon this continent in 639 CE, Common Era. Those who are Christian, they call it AD, Anno Domini, that's after Christ. And on its 800 year of existence, that's 8 centuries after, around 1400, Christianity also descended upon us. So together, we have been living a religious existence for 1,400 years, 14 centuries. Now you can imagine the damage, because for religion to flourish, it had to kill African spirituality. So the attack was on the culture, because the culture is the vehicle of African spirituality. So I put that disclaimer up front so that people don't say, oh, but this one says it's done this way, but this one says it's done this way. We are all in a journey. We are piecing this together. We are like a people trying to reclaim their existence and reclaiming who they were. So having put that disclaimer up front, I think I decided to just focus on 3 issues about African spirituality, and then we'll see when the question comes. I think the first one is that in African spirituality, there is no concept of God as we know it in religion. And why do I say that? Because one, and I'll keep using examples where it's permissible. One, in the Zulu one, for instance, the supreme being or originator is called Umvelinqangi. Now, in Zulu, when I say U, it is not gender grammar. So there's no he, she, his, her. So U is used for both the male and the female. Now, the connotation of Umvelinqangi does not necessarily mean a male god. So there is no God in that sense in spirituality. So they are not gender demarcated. If you look at religion, and that's why we call them religions of the book, because Judaism started first, gave birth to Christianity, gave birth to Islam. We call the 3 the religions of the book. You'll see that the concept of God, as in a genderized conceptualization, is a male. Then all the angels are male. Jesus is a male, so you're saved also in the name of a male. And all the disciples were male. That's why the first church on earth, the Catholic Church, to date, does not have female priests. It's only male. So we don't have that concept in African spirituality. You'll find that there is, I've termed it the originator or the supreme being, because to use the term God would be borrowing it from religion. For instance, in Zulu, we don't say, where do you come from? We say you Dabugapi, which means where do you originate from? So that's why I've termed it the originator. Now you'll find that it's the originator, and then you have a pantheon of deities. Those deities, that's where the gender is normally spelled out. But the interesting thing about African spirituality is that those deities would be both male and female. You don't find an avalanche of a gender against another gender. And then you have ancestors, whom we call the living dead, who also come in both genders. So there is no concept of a God in that way. But also, there's no concept of God in the supremeness of what the religious God is. I almost said Christian, but it's the same for Islam. It's the same for Judaism, where their supremeness is untamed. It's not tempered with anything. They are law unto themselves, if I can borrow that concept. And I'm sure for a religious person listening to me, they're just like, my God, that's blasphemy. But that's what it is. In spirituality, that originator is challenged by the deities many times. And the deities win in some of the stories that are told. So you are not behest to a God who couldn't deal with the devil, decided to throw him on earth, and then he's going to throw you into hell because you can't deal with the devil that he couldn't deal with in the first place. So we don't have that. That sameness does not exist. It's always tempered. The deities are tempered by ancestors. We temper ancestors. People say you can't question ancestors. That's not true in spirituality. You shout at your ancestors when things are not going well. They shout at the deities shout at the originator, So there's always checks and balances. That power is tempered. But also there's no concept of God in a sense that the supreme being, Umvelinqangi in our sense, Moari for the Shona or Ludmare for the Yoruba. No, we call them differently. They are not present in your daily life. The Arabs came first, as I said, in 639, and they termed this an absent God, and they berated us for it. Around 1400, the Catholics were the first to come through the Spanish and the Portuguese, Catholic obviously. They rided on this absent God and berated us for it also. But Jomo Kenyatta wrote a very interesting book called Facing Mount Kenya, concentrating on rainmaking. And he tears apart this concept of an absent God. It's good to have an absent originator, because in African spirituality, we say the originator has given you a mind to use, which you're not allowed to use in religion, by the way. That's why you can't question. That's why it's called blind faith. believe by faith, then they have shut off anything you can do after that. You can't ask. So the absent originator works on the premise that you've been given a mind to think, use it. You've been given a science, use it. You've been given spirituality. That's why we have rites of passage at every stage of your rites of passage, from a child to adulthood to when you are aged now to the career that you go into. We expect you to have accumulated and integrated what you learn through your culture, through the science of your community, and through your spirituality, so that you can leave a mark on earth. You know, the pyramids are a biggest example of that, because the pyramids are a mix of the science of the spirituality, and together it produces. That's why religion would never ever be able to counter that feat. That's why they don't want to even accredit it to us. I'm speaking to people who know. I'm preaching to the converted. That's why they don't even want to say Egypt was a black civilization, because they know they would never counter that feat, because you need spirituality to do that. Spirituality and science go together. On the other hand, religion says matter versus spirit, and they say the two don't meet. In spirituality, African spirituality, we say science and spirituality come together at the altar. In my home altar, when I kneel and I do this, we do this in South Africa. We say Kamaku or Togoza. Togoza means peace be unto you. And we start with Gogo, the grandmother. It's a whole concept. We don't have time to cover it tonight. Could be something for another time. The grandmother, Gogo, is a whole concept. It's a whole philosophy. So we call them first. And then when we do that, we believe I am the matter, the physical embodiment. The ancestors that I'm calling are the spirit. The science and the future of it is the originator. So for us, the three come together at my home altar. We don't say matter versus spirit. So the concept then of the absent originator lies there, that you have a mind, use it. You've been given a science, use it. You have been given spirituality. You know how to speak to the living dead. You know how to connect with your pantheon of deities. So use that to solve it. And Jomo Kenyatta, to go back to him, does that very well in that book. He uses a terminology that I like. He says, we don't pray for rain. Actually, that is my edition. We don't pray for rain. He says we fetch rain, and I've added on to that. So we don't pray and wait in faith. And when the rain doesn't come, we even make excuses for God and we say it was God's will. No, that's not how African spirituality works. You combine your science, your spirituality, the knowledge in your culture, you fetch that rain. He says, you climb that mountain. It doesn't matter if you are 3 months on that mountain. One thing for sure, the day you come down, you'll come down with that rain. So we don't have then God in that manner of understanding, that conceptual and philosophical attributes of the religious God ever present in your daily life. They've given you a mind, but they're the ones who provide. They're the ones who do this. Everything you do, you know, you must pray, you must start by them. And they decide if they answer or not. So we don't have God in that way. I think the last point I want to touch at in terms of we don't have a God in of religion is that the originator is not retributive. That's why we don't have heaven or hell. I know people have a hard time wrapping their finger around this, because we've been threatened with heaven and hell from grade 1. There's a friend of mine from Malawi who tells this story as a joke. He says, you know, I was 5 when I first heard about the crucifixion of Jesus. I was 5 at Sunday school, and the whole thing was explained in its goriness, the nails as they went through the hand and the blood splattering. And he says, and then the Sunday teacher school turned around and said, it's because of you and you and you and you. He says, I had nightmares for the coming 2 years. Believe it or not, I couldn't sleep, because I was like, how could I have caused such a brutal death of an innocent man? So we don't have a retributive originator, because we don't have heaven or hell. That's why we don't have sin. You break the cultural code. That's why the culture is so crucial and so central for Africans. And that's why that was the first line of attack for any colonialist who came here. It's the culture they brought down and destroyed and berated and, you know, just downgraded into nothing. because they knew that our spirituality and culture go hand in hand. As I said when I started, the culture is the vehicle of the spirituality. The language is the vehicle of the culture. I've called it the triad of application of our spirituality. That's why it's kind of difficult to actually practice African spirituality in its fullness if you don't speak a single African language. You truly, I deal with people in the US whom I am journeying with, my brothers and sisters, and I say, do yourself a favor. If you could learn English, when they brought your forefathers here as slaves, there was no academy. They conquered and acquired English. You can acquire an African language. Do yourself that favor. Because while we say there is no single African spirituality, the silhouette or the body, is there. We can draw and say this is African spirituality. Maybe the bones, the veins, the heart could be different variations here and there because the vehicle is the culture. But we can draw a structure and say this is the silhouette. So if you speak an African language, you are well on your journey to understanding our spirituality in full, and to carve it for yourself. So that was the first point. I said there's no concept of God. The second concept I want to dwell on is no culture, no spirituality. I think I've already started on it. You can't practice African spirituality devoid of the culture. It is always located or centered in a culture. And that's where cosmology comes in, because in spirituality, there's no creationism. It's cosmology, which is how people came into being, how people originated. The Zulu people, for instance, believe they came forth from reeds, which is why at the end of the African year, around September 22, the last day, September 23 being the first, is always the time around which the reed dance is held, because that's what's sacred for them. It's like what Easter is to Christians. So you'll find for the Yoruba, depending on what their cosmology story is, they will have celebrations that emulate or centers around the time at which, that cosmology says they came forth. So the culture is so crucial. It is really crucial. And I think that's why my heart always goes out for people who are in the diaspora, in a place where they don't speak the language, they don't know the culture. But also, the onslaught on African culture is not a past thing. I can tell you, when I grew up in South Africa, it was akin for any African household in Soweto for you to walk in and people are conversing in English. But it is like that now. Now we raise African kids who can not even pronounce their own names, which are in an African language, because they don't speak the language. So the onslaught on that culture by default becomes the onslaught on the spirituality. And then by default becomes an onslaught on the language. The three go together. So that's why we argue that religion forces you to take off your African culture for you to clothe it on. And I'll give you an example. So that's why when the Arabs came in 639, people had to adopt Muslim names. So you're taking off your African name and you're putting on an Arab name. You have to learn the Quran in Arabic because you're going to pray in Arabic. So you're taking off your culture and you're putting on Arabic culture. That's why I always call it the Islamization and the Arabization of our people. Christianity came and did the same around 1400. That's why, when I grew up, because I tasted a bit under apartheid, you had a heathen name and then you had your Christian name. So your heathen name would be Khanyisile, your Christian name would be Mary. This thing happened throughout the continent. The two colonizers followed the same pattern because they understood that if they deculturize you, if I can use such a word, you will then be a best candidate for religion. So not speaking an African language is really a disservice to people. I think another thing I want to say is, when you don't speak the language, you don't just lose the practice of spirituality, but you lose, I think, I would call it, who the critical personnel are in your life. Like, for instance, because I've been to around 37, 38, I need to count African countries now. And I always ask the people, because I do my research even as I travel for formal things, just to satisfy myself that it's like that even for them. For almost all African societies, all the men on your mother's side are called Ma, which is mother. So your uncle on your mother's side is Malume, which is, I've termed it, a male mother. And then all the females on your father's side, for Sotho people, for Tswana people, a father is Ra. So that female will be Ragadi. So I've called them a male mother. Sorry, a female father, a female father. So, so if you don't speak the language, you don't pick up those little nuances, because the role of malume, all the brother, all the father, all the brothers of your mother, or all your maternal uncles, their role is so crucial in your life as a nephew or as a niece, because they are the beacon of what keeps the maternal culture in you alive. So if I meet you, like my mother is a Dlamini, and you meet me and I have not mastered what Dlamini people do, I don't know anything about my maternal, it will be the female mothers, the uncles, that are to blame, because that's their role. On the paternal side, if you meet all the females, the Ragadi, the Babegasi, or the Dadobao, Xhosa people say, which all really means a female father, if I don't know anything about my paternal and I'm getting lost, they're to blame, because they're the ones who are supposed to keep that up. So you'll find that even when your rites of passage, certain rituals, if things don't go well, if a goat must be slaughtered for you, those two people are so crucial in your life. They are the bearers of culture on both sides. And I like the balance, because people say we're patriarchal. Now, if you don't speak a language, these little nuances get lost because you don't understand them, and you run with the disinformation that we're patriarchal, or that our spirituality itself, is patriarchal, as religion is. And I think that point I want to make is African spirituality is holistic. It's a lifestyle. That's why I smile at people who want to slaughter a goat on Friday, put the sacred parts, Msamo, which is the whole home altar, and do the whole thing. And then on Sunday, they go to church and they take the sacrament. And I'm just like, what are you doing? Because African spirituality is holistic. It covers you from birth. I mean, how a child's name is chosen is not just random. We didn't take a book and we say, we think you're going to be Sebastian. It follows a certain process depending on the culture. What they say is baptism. For instance, we say umemulo in Zulu. It will cover you when you move from girlhood to womanhood, the rites of passage. It will follow you how you get married, the rituals. It will follow you at death, how you are buried, the rituals that are conducted when you are buried, and depending how you died, the rituals differ. It will cover you into your afterlife, which is another conversation we need to have. English says answers, it bundles them into one. No, guys, there are different types, and they do different things. And you might be lucky to carry, at the top of my head, and I'm still searching, I've counted at least 9 to 10 different categories of ancestors. And you might be lucky to carry all of them, but you might not necessarily carry all of them. Someone might carry only 2 of the 10 that I've counted. Someone might carry all of them. Someone might carry 5. So it is holistic. You don't need religion to pitch in at your birth, or to pitch in at your naming ceremony, or to pitch in. No, it covers you. It's a life to death journey. That's why the culture is important, because it is practiced through the culture. Whenever I talk on this point, I always pause and I say, again, that's why I marvel when people do a white wedding and then they say, now I've had the a white wedding, I'm going to have the cultural ceremony. Or they start with the cultural ceremony and then they say, now I'm going to have the white wedding. And I'm just like, no, that was culture too. White wedding is a culture. It's just not yours, but it's a culture. So you've married in two opposing cultures because the two don't meet. Let's not fool ourselves. The two don't meet. That's why ours had to be destroyed for that one to flourish, because white people or Arabs weren't stupid. They knew the two will not coincide, and they don't coincide. Guys, it's either or. So people wear black to funerals. I started about 4 years ago. I rebel against that because the black sheep of the family, black as in mourning. I'm just like, I'm looking at Zulu culture. The hide or the skin of a cow, the beads, I'm wearing one bead here. The bead, none of it is pure black. As a matter of fact, we scarcely used pure black in anything. So where did the culture of you wear black to a funeral come from? It is Western. That's why Hindu people didn't buy into it. They wear white to funerals. If you look at them, they retained it. So African spirituality is holistic. Truly, we do not need religion. And where people are double dipping, I call it double dipping. I call it dabbling in spirits, really, because both carry spirits that don't meet. You dabble. A friend of mine in the Navy used to say, your people amaze me. He was white and he reported to me, and he would say, permission to speak freely. And I would say, speak, Captain. And he says, your people amaze me. And I say, why? He says, you mix things that would never mix in life. How you do it, only you know. Because there is no way the Bible states that Christ is the Alpha and the Omega. When that curtain tore at the Holy of Holies, it was finished. That's the only name. Now, if you use that name and you still come on Friday and you want to slaughter for ancestors, it's like, okay, how do you integrate the two? But they've confused that so much. Guys, we need to keep going back to those years. 1,400 years of this confusion. People no longer even know who they are. People no longer know if the East is in the West or the West is in the East. I mean, we celebrate New Year on 31st December. I'm just like, I'm already in my New Year. Don't send me, New Year wishes. I've had mine on 23 September. It's so hard. I've decided to just write one generic message and I say, thank you so much, but my year is in its 4th month now, but I appreciate that you thought of me at that particular time. So yeah, I think I'll pause here on those 3 points. That there's no conceptualization of God as there is in religion. 2, no culture, no spirituality. 3, it is holistic. It leaves no gap for confusion. I think I'll stop there and see if we have questions.
Okay, Nduku, you want to go?
I'm gonna dive on language because I am doing that and I'm all about solutions and action, right? We started a community, Jumuiya ya Nguzo Saba, that is teaching Kiswahili to unite us. And I was so happy when you talked about the representation of matriarchy in the mother's side and the representation of patriarchy in the father's side, right? Not as we know it in the Uzungu culture. And in Kiswahili, it is that way. My mother's younger sister is my mother's younger brother is Baba Mdogo. So in that way, rather, my mother's younger sister is Mama Mdogo, and my mother's older sister is Mama Mkubwa, and the other way. My father's younger brother is Baba Mdogo, and my father's older brother is Baba Mkubwa. So where the side of the father is representing the Baba, Ubaba, right? All of that side. And the side of the mother is representing the Umama. And that we in our community have been working to show that Kiswahili is indeed an African language that was unfortunately infected by Arabic influence and many other influences, including German and Portuguese. And so we are returning the language to its original African being. And this thing that you just mentioned is even making me ground my feet even deeper in the fact that this is our language. People who spoke languages that were common to each other, they called them Bantu. We need to remember what they were called before the white man called them Bantu. Came together, had differences in the way they were speaking, and decided to unite and make a language that they could all agree on. And you can see its African roots in different ways, including this particular one. So I am so glad you said that, because we have our different, and Me speaking Kiswahili all my life never took away from my Kamba culture. I speak Kamba. Sometimes I think I even speak Kamba more fluently than Kiswahili. I will get on the phone and speak to my mother in Kikamba. And I have been
Wow.
speaking both languages since I was a child. So learning
Togos.
Swahili, right? These people who have these Africans who want to hold on so much in on our current ways of being, and they fear, because it's fear, honestly. They fear if they embrace Kiswahili, they will lose their Yoruba or their whatever other African culture they have. No, you can have both and just take one as a unifying language and the other one as your community identification. But yes, speak a little bit more on the language, because that's crucial right now as we're trying to bring more Africans to learn Kiswahili.
So yes, the words you used are the same. So the younger sisters to your mom are mamncane, which is literally small mother, and if they are older is mamkhulu, that's big mother, and on the father's side is babomncane, which is small father. If they are bigger is babomkhulu, which is big father.
Yeah.
Apart from the ones that I also made an example of to show that our gender was not biological, it was a fleeting gender, which is what African spirituality is about, the balance. That's why the males on your mother's side are mothers, the females on your father's side are baba. The language is important in that if you don't speak it, for instance, I always get so opposed to the word "and" because it makes our languages to be linguistically challenged. We don't use "and" for every occasion. We are specific. Once you've said mamncane, I know for sure that's your maternal. I'm not confused if it's your maternal or your paternal, but the word "and" is generic for everything. The word "uncle" is generic for everything. So if you don't speak the language, you miss out on those little nuances. But you also miss out on a very important aspect that I have argued in the book that we are talking about, that we want to get out, that patriarchy is an African. Patriarchy is religious, but spirituality is not patriarchal. And if anything, it can even lean more to matriarchy if it had to choose a gender than to patriarchy. So language is important, and in language is embedded what I call idioms. In Zulu, we say izaga nezisho. Idioms and sayings. Hey, my sister, you know, in those idioms and sayings is a wealth of knowledge. So I've started my second book, which I have termed African Spirituality, Get Up and Be Counted. And I'm not using anything. I decided I'm only going to use idioms and sayings that I know, because in those idioms and sayings is a wealth of what the culture is or what the spirituality is. So language is crucial. If language was not crucial, why would they have killed so much for language? It was forbidden to speak our
Exactly.
languages. I mean, in Angola, they were flogged. That's why Umbundu and Kimbundu are dying languages, actually, because they were flogged for speaking their language. And people think flogging only happened during slavery. It happened even under colonialism. That's why the languages were attacked. And because they hoped that when you stop speaking your language, you lose yourself, which is what happens. Actually, you lose yourself. You don't know who you are. So, no, language is crucial. It's the vehicle of the culture, while the culture is the vehicle of the spirituality. Meaning, if you lose the language, you lose the culture, you lose the culture, you lose the spirituality. You lose all three, you lose yourself, in essence.
And therefore, to return to a full being, which is all three, right? We need the
Yes,
language so that it
yes,
can drive us, carry us to the culture, so that
yes.
the two of them can carry us to our spirituality.
Spirituality.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you,
Fantastic.
Mama
That's something
Nisile.
else. So that's a triarchy you said, yeah? Culture, language, and
And
spirituality.
maybe just briefly about Swahili or Kiswahili. I mean, a lot of the words in Bantu languages are the same. A goat is imbuzi. It's like that for Swahili too.
Exactly.
Um, meat is inyama.
Mtu,
A pig
mtu,
is ingulube. You know, it can be pronounced slightly
nguruwe,
different, but ingulube.
nguruwe.
So I don't. I think
The evidence is there.
yes. I think my sister Kiswahili threatens the colonialist. It threatens the 1% that rules the world.
Exactly.
And we unknowingly have run with the agenda that, oh, it's not an African language, there's a lot of Arabic in it. And how do they say just nonsense? Are you
Exactly.
telling me a person who speaks Swahili will walk into Algeria, Algiers, in the capital, and start speaking Swahili and they will understand her because they speak Arabic? I mean, that's nonsense. Go to Saudi Arabia and speak Swahili and tell me if they even hear 10% of what we are saying. I think we say these things without thinking. But I think it's the agenda of the people, because I've always said, imagine if the AU passes a law that from 2024, every grade one will learn Kiswahili as an added language. Are you aware that in 12 years, we would have produced a first breed of Africans who don't need interpretation when they get together in a room? But also the beauty of Kiswahili is that it's not a people. So you can't say, oh, but I can't do that over my Zulu. We want you to love your Zulu and we want you to actually be 100% Zulu because we don't want to lose that. The beauty of Kiswahili is it's not a people. It's just a language. On the other hand, English is a people. French is a people. German is a people. So you are putting them on a pedestal, but you're downgrading yourself, because the more English we speak, the more England gets on a pedestal, but not us.
Wow.
Thank you.
Wow. Okay, my sister Khanyisile, I'm gonna ask this question basically because I've heard you in the previous videos, and this particular video that I watched where you were talking about the light bulb moment, the moment that made you think, you know what, where am I going? What I'm following is a load of crap. And I saw it in your own words that day. I watched that video. So, what was the light bulb moment that made you realize that? Because you said you used to be a former Christian. What was the light bulb moment that made you think, you know what, it's time to do a 360-degree turnaround? Tell us a little bit about that.
Yeah, look, I am born and bred Catholic, and I think by and large my siblings are Catholic. But I went to, and we went to Catholic schools, obviously, and at high school we all went to boarding schools. But I went to a non-Catholic boarding school in 1979 when I was doing grade 10. And then I met this Protestantism, like I met a God where you don't need to be somber and feel sorry for yourself to worship them. So I got drawn to being born again, and I did get born again. And then I journeyed with that until I skipped the country and I joined Umkhonto weSizwe, which was the military wing of the African National Congress, as a struggle activist, anti-apartheid. And then I met communism, and I mean, I've read Marxism and Lenin and Engels so much. I mean, that's all that we were fed until it came out of your ears. So then I was like, oh, okay, religion is an opium of the masses. Okay, I get this. And then I thought, I've left for sure. This thing has no hold on me anymore. Then I came back in the early 90s. And before long, I had dwindled back into being born again. And I journeyed with that until around 2008. And it was a slow detachment. I think the thing with religion is that Marx was really telling the truth. It's an opium, but also it's very contagious. But I think it's worse than cocaine and those other drugs, honestly, because there's no rehab to go and de-religionize, if there's such a word, at the moment where you realize that this is a hoax. There's no institution where you can go and say, I'm detaching. There are no steps to follow. You know, you have to struggle along as I did, as I'm sure you guys did, and as I'm sure people who are listening now are doing. Some of them are done with it, some of them are doing it. And it's a process because it has you from birth to death, just like spirituality. So I think the last time when I detached around 2008, it was truly more about my people. It's always been. I flash back at poems I wrote when I was 14. At that time, it was localized to South Africa because of apartheid. It's the state of Africans vis-a-vis Indians, vis-a-vis what they call colored mixed race, vis-a-vis whites. I was always just like, but how is this? How are we the underdogs? It didn't make sense. And I think joining MK made me realize, okay, but this is not just South African. I mean, I got to Angola at the middle of their civil war. It was raging. And the South African government, at the time, apartheid government, the West were supporting UNITA. against the MPLA because they didn't want communism. And I'm just like, the brutal murders. I was just looking at Angola and I'm just like, you switch on at the wall and there's no electricity. You open a tap and there's no water. And I'm like, okay, this is not just South African related. The state of Black people is an international thing. And I think as I became global and I realized, no, it was okay to start being concerned with African South Africans, but this is a global thing. Wherever you find an African, we emit the same symptoms. So when I was detaching around 2008, it was for me really one thing. When my daughter turned 13, she turns 23 this year. When she turned 13, she found me already on a journey of doubting but not sure. But when she turned 13, she said to me and my husband, I want to have a conversation with you guys when I come back from school today. I don't want any gifts for my birthday. I'm 13, which means I'm a teenager. She asked a resounding question. She said, when colonialism happened at that point, did they have separate ships for missionaries that brought them here and the Bibles? And they had separate ships for the arms, the ammunition, because they came through the ships, guys. They were not manufactured here. Did they have separate ships for the arms, the ammunition, the soldiers, the colonial administrator, or everyone was just mishmashed into this one ship that would last 4 weeks at sea, sometimes 3 months at sea? And I still had a master's then. My husband and I looked at each other and she said, oh, you're not answering. I can see 2 master's degrees. You have cognitive dissonance. I said, I must be honest, I didn't know it then. I said, I have cognitive what? She said, you have 2 master's degrees for what? You don't know cognitive dissonance. We all suffer from it. The degrees differ, which is what's going on with you right now. It was the same ship, but you don't want to answer me because we're in the born again fraternity. Said, it was the same ship. And she said, the conundrum I cannot get over is, why did Jesus not convert these people at sea and stop them from the horrors they were coming to commit? That would have been easy than to leave them commit the horrors, then rush for the victims and want to save the victims from hell, but they're not saving the victims from this life. It left a lasting imprint on me. I mean, already, as I say, I was more drawn to my people and to Pan-Africanism, truly. And all the questions I had had about Christianity then, in any case, had always been about my people. That when we say Africans are going to hell, like, what are you saying? We've lived 2 hells. Actually, there are more. We just don't count them. You know, the Greek Empire also invaded North Africa and colonized. So did the Romans after them. Then the Arabs came. Then the Europeans came. So I'm just like, how are we going to burn to hell forever with someone who was a colonial administrator? Like, break this down for me. Let's have common sense here. A colonial administrator who died not born again is going to go to hell. With the same person who died not born again, who was an African, whom this colonial administrator raped at will at any given time, whipped at will at any given time, they're gonna go and face the same hell for eternity. Just, I think, honestly, some things were just not adding up. And yeah, I think the global exposure helped a lot. I think it's the only thing I like social media for, because it's putting the world at the palm of your hand. Because the social media has actually made me realize our state is the same everywhere. And it made me realize, as we say now, I got the proof, colonialism has not died. It just mutated into another form, which we call neocolonialism, which in a Latin, neo means new. So it's a new form. Now it's globalization, which is still a continuation of neoliberalism. So I think, I don't know what I said in the one you listened to, but obviously it always comes fresh at any given time. But I think for me, those were the things. But it was not easy, I tell you. I went through a phase where I believed all Africans were Jews. I don't know how a stock of 12 different ethnicities would have given birth to over 5,000 different cultures of Africa. It doesn't make sense, but I went through that where I made Jesus black. I didn't want to detach. It's painful. It's like waking up and everything you've ever believed in, it's a lie. So I made him black and I said, no, we are the original Jews. And then, you know, and slowly the beauty is we journeyed it together as a family. So I think that's what strengthened us. It's very hard where you are married and you're on this journey alone and your spouse wants to hear nothing about it. They are still stuck there. I always say, you that has found spirituality are of a higher consciousness. So bear with them and hope, you know, and pray to ancestors that finally, you know, they will see. But you need to be the example in that instance. I don't know if that answers you, but yeah, I think I've had a very long and interesting life of different phases, and I think all those phases came and added together to make me
Okay, let me
realize
just add it. Sorry, Ndugu, before you go. So, because I
it's
know
fine.
people are watching and listening, and this is basically conversations that we have with the family or we have with
Mm,
friends, and we argue, and sometimes a bit difficult to actually
mm,
address this. Sometimes you're scared as to how they're going to
mm,
respond to you.
mm,
Because, like you, myself and my wife, thankfully, we're on a journey together of
mm,
discovery, and
mm,
I've mentioned to you on a few chats, and
mm,
we realized that, like you said, everything that we've been, indoctrinated with is lies.
mm,
It's difficult for some people to accept the fact that, is Jesus really real, or is it not real? Because I'm struggling to basically help people understand that there's a African mythology that came about before all these things began, but people
mm,
don't understand this. Can you speak to
mm.
that?
I don't know if I even want to call it mythology. I always say, if you're gonna call the various cosmologies of how Africans came into being mythology, then the story of the pregnant virgin is also mythology, by the way, because it has never repeated itself in life. Have you ever thought of that? We have never had a virgin fall pregnant ever in life. So why do you want me to blindly believe that and disallow me to call it mythology? And then you call, when Zulu people say we sprang forth from reeds at the same time, both male and female equally, you call that cosmology. Sorry, you call that mythology. Who has the right to name things? So where I am, my brother, I am at a point where I am so sure I am not going back. That doesn't matter for me who Jesus was, you know. If he was there, I'm happy for him. If he came to save the Jews, I'm happy for the Jews, but he didn't come to save me. Because at the point at which he came, I still suffered Ma'afa. I still suffered the invasion by the Muslims. I suffered the invasion through slavery. I suffered the invasion through colonialism. I'm still suffering the invasion of neocolonialism, which is economic and cultural slavery, the pillaging of our resources. You know, that's not the focus and the topic. But I can tell you that big business doesn't pay tax in Africa. A UNECA report, United Nations Economic Commission on Africa, that was done, a 30-year study between 1980, it stopped at 2008, but I always like round figures, I say up to 2010, says we lost an estimate of 1.5 US trillion sub-Sahara alone. And the breakdown is alarming because only 5% is direct African government corruption. 31% is criminal activity, but 64% is crimes. They don't know tax evasion, tax avoidance, profit shifting, all of those things. So I'm still suffering another form of invasion, which is neocolonialism. So he came that I might have life and have it to the fullest. Guys, there are only 3 races on earth. The rest are nations, and we shouldn't be confused. You have the Caucasian race, that's white. You have the Mongoloid race, that's all the yellow people. You have the Negroid race, which is where the Sway with nigger, Negro came from, which is us. Which race is having life and having it in abundance of the 3? We don't have life in abundance. We are still looking for life. We had it before they came. People say there were dark ages in Europe when the Roman Empire fell in 476 until around 1400 when they had the Renaissance. I say we had a dark ages immediately they landed on this soil called Africa uninvited, and we have been in the dark ages since. So whether he came, Jesus, or he didn't come, it's neither here nor there, the English say for me. I like it when they use this term. It's neither here nor there, because it has not put bread on the table for me. It has not changed the course of history for my people. It has not given my people. If you look at it selfishly, and that's another thing, we need a podcast just on analyzing how self-centered and individualistic the religions of the book are. The songs about I get saved in the name, I go to heaven. The day I found Jesus, it's so self-centered. And if you look at it that way, you are happy Jesus did something for you. I'm not there. I've always carried the weight of my people with me. It has always been my calling. So for me, I look at it from race level, from my people's level. Jesus has not made any difference in our lives. If
Whoa,
anything, he's enslaved us even more, because he's killed the core of who we are. He's made us lose ourselves. How did God give us over 5,000 rich cultures just to come and replace them with Portuguese, English, and French? How?
whoa, that's deep. That's deep. Nduku,
Jesus has
go.
enslaved us even more. That's a good one. I'll hold on to that one. Every time they come with the Bible, I'll be like, Jesus. And it's true, the evidence is there. Jesus has enslaved us even more because of you Africans who are touting Jesus and talking about him all the time. You're not awakening and going back to our African selves. I agree with you. I do have a question, but before I ask it, I agree with you that even for me, the global exposure is what gave me my awakening. If I had remained
Mm,
in Kenya, I would
mm,
have been ignorant to what is going on.
yes.
Being around white people who are grounded in this culture of exploitation and greed,
Mm,
being around them constantly, daily, I mean, daily, is what made me start asking, what is going on? Right? You start by asking because they have told us we are not intelligent. You're in that room, you're the only black person, and you're the most intelligent.
mm.
You're the one who's
But
making sense.
can you give me permission to just interject you for a
Yes, yes,
minute? I
Yes.
think ancestors just want you to hear
yes,
this
please.
in that light. It is in my book. It's a concluding chapter of my book. Look, no one has suffered colonialism like the African woman. That's why it defies logic that there are more women in church today than men. African men have seen through this. The victims of the victims, it's like a battered woman syndrome. We are the ones in church, but we are the ones who lost so much through religion. See, I said when we go to the home altar in summer, we say Togozanbo Gogonabomkulu. We call the Gogo first, because think of my art. It is the Gogo who controls the underworld. It is Gogo that weighs the souls in African
Mhm.
spirituality. So Gogo is so important. So that's why the last task of Gogo on earth was to sit people around the fire and recount the culture and the spirituality and the heritage. The Gogo was the encyclopedia. The Gogo was the Bible or the Quran. That's why when they die, they don't lose that role. So at pre-colonially, we believed that African women are sacred. Actually, we called them procreators with the originator, because they can give birth, which is why they were closer to the spirit world than the men, which is why most seers I see today, it's fashionable, you get them in male, you get them in female, but most seers, what we call Isangoma, was more a role for women, because we believe that only women can see into the spirit world. So women were sacred, women were seers, and women, because of that, women were the only ones allowed to till the land, agriculture. And because we tilled the land, we controlled the markets. Because we controlled the markets, we controlled the economy. Because we controlled that, we controlled the health. Because we knew which herbs go with what. We became the cooks, not because we were pregnant and barefoot in the kitchen, but because that was our domain. We understood what we were cooking, because
Yeah.
we knew you can't mix this and that. Now, when Christianity came, we fell so hard. We fell on our faces. It's called what in English? Headlong, whatever the English said, but we fell flat on our faces, because we were dethroned, because we were taken off from the tower of being sacred, of being procreators, of being the tillers of the land, and we became what? Think about it. I want to pause on this. We became what?
Nothing.
The beguiled and the beguiler, the deceived and the deceiver. How can men trust us? Because the Bible says we are deceivers. So do you blame them when they don't trust us? We are easily deceived. The men were left just for a moment, and that was enough for us to fall into the trap of the devil, and we didn't stop there. We called the man, and we put him in the same trap with us. So we lost so much. It's a concluding chapter. I actually have a table where I say this is what African spirituality say, and African woman is, this is what religion say we are. Paul calls us the weaker sex. You know, women can't teach women, learn in silence. We lost so much. I was prompted to just take this out from what you were saying, that the globalization of your exposure made you detach. And I would say, as an African woman, run so far away from religion, because religion has no respect for you as a woman, in general, as a woman, but for us more so, because we know our spirituality respected us.
Yes.
Wow.
I am looking forward to the conversation we will have as a book review when your book is out, and we will have it this year, and I'm looking forward to that. My question is on Ubuntu. We in Jumuiya ya Nguzo Saba are grounded in the Nguzo Saba, which is umoja, and I will not provide a translation today. We are sticking with Kiswahili. Umoja, if you don't know, go find out for yourself.
Yeah.
Umoja, kujichagulia, ujima, ujamaa, nia, kuumba, and imani. And I have been with my fellow community members saying that all those together add up to Ubuntu. In my I haven't grown up practicing Ubuntu, and therefore this was for me a very, 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 this is still and will always be a great opportunity to get to speak to someone who has practiced it all her life, or at least been in presence with Ubuntu. Please speak on what is Ubuntu.
Yeah, sorry, sis. And before you go,
Yeah.
I'm just gonna add to it because I talk about Ubuntu a lot. Because Unduku asked me the word, what should we call Africans? And I said, we are Ubuntu.
The people of
In my
Ubuntu.
post, I use Ubuntu a lot. So please speak to that for us.
Ubuntu comes from the core of a human, not a person, a human. Because when we say a human being in our languages in South Africa, we say umuntu. The Sotho, the umuntu, that is Zulu, Xhosa, Ndebele, and Swati. Pedi, Tswana, and Sotho, we call them the Sotho languages. They say umuntu. Tsonga people say munu. So
And
that,
in Kiswahili.
yes, yes. So Ubuntu then comes from being human, which means a dog cannot have Ubuntu. A lizard cannot have Ubuntu because they are not human. And the concept of what a human is lies in the spirituality, carried through the culture and the language. For instance, Zulu people have an idiom, umuntu ngabantu. It's actually Nguni because Xhosa people use it too, Swati people and Ndebele people. Sotho groups have it too, actually. Umuntu ngabantu, muthu ki muthu ka batho, meaning you are human because other people are human, or they are human because you are human. That's the essence of Ubuntu, meaning it is an Ubuntu to sing a song that says, I am going home, I am going to heaven, and then the next person is going where? It is, we should have a session, just unpack the songs that we sing in religion. The day I found Jesus, my soul. No, Ubuntu is not. Ubuntu is about the community. So Ubuntu would have said, the day we Zulu people found, the day we Zulu people will go to heaven, the day we. So Ubuntu is akin to capitalism. It is an anathema to capitalism. It is the opposite of self-centeredness. It is the opposite of glamour when you are in an island of poverty, but it's shining alone. That's the opposite of Ubuntu. Ubuntu is about communal development, community. That's why we even divided societies, my brother, pre-colonially. into mothers who had babies would be grouped together because they can learn and share with one another. Girls had their own community, boys had their own, unmarried adult women had their own, married early marriage women had their own, gogos had their own. You were always within a community of people who are like-minded to you, so you never were alone. You never carried alone. You were helped to carry. That is the essence of Ubuntu. It was a communal thing. And Ubuntu, I would dare say that's actually the second book that I'm writing, as I said. I would dare say Ubuntu is not limited to how humans treat humans. Ubuntu extends to how humans treat nature and how nature treats humans. For instance, Zulu people have a saying, they say, "Isihlahla sinyelwa." You don't shit on a tree because they don't, idioms don't finish off. But I mean, we finish off to explain. Why? Because you might need that same tree to come and sit under its shade. You don't know what tomorrow holds. So the tree you shit on or shit under today, you might find that by Friday you need the shade of that tree. You are passing the same tree and you need it. So Ubuntu really is about stewardship on earth. Ubuntu goes back to where we started, the Jomo Kenyatta thing. The originator is not here. The deities are not here. You've been given domain here on earth. So Ubuntu is mixing the science, the culture, and the spirituality to be a good steward to other humans, to nature, and to the animals that we find on earth. That's why when people came from war, they were not allowed even into the village. We had outposts where they would be cleansed. And I'm talking a necessary war, not a war or a filthy, greedy war of the British attacking South Africa because they want the gold and the diamond. No, I'm talking necessary war where people are attacking you because because some evil spirit is controlling them, so they are taking you and you are forced to defend yourself. For us still, under Ubuntu, killing was killing. Human blood is human blood. So we had outposts where we would keep you. Listen to this cleansing. They cleanse depending what you used. In different societies, use different things in Africa. But for us, it was spears. They would cleanse your spears that you brought back. They would cleanse the shield. They would cleanse you. They would cleanse the village that you are going to go into. They would cleanse your homestead. They had to slaughter to cleanse themselves. So we took Ubuntu, the central tenet of Ubuntu is we take human blood seriously, and spilling it is a taboo, not a sin. It's a taboo and a violation against Ubuntu itself, but also how you treat nature was also itself a taboo. That's why you didn't cut trees the way you wanted. That's why we respected the soil you planted in a certain way, which is why we didn't even allow men to touch the soil. We believed it will go barren. The women with wombs should touch the soil and till it. And has our soil not gone barren, by the way? Because when they introduced the cash crop, they put us aside, my sister, and the men were pushed into agriculture. So the whole concept of Ubuntu, I would say, embodies the whole concept of our spirituality.
Yeah. So to all the Africans who are listening, and to all the Africans who will listen today, let me not hear you speaking to me telling me you don't have Ubuntu in Yoruba or in Kikamba or in Luo or in whatever other culture. It just goes by a different name. So you all have heard it today from Mama Khanyisile. It is the description of what the principle is. How does it look? The name might be different based on the different languages.
In fact, my sister, just to affirm you there, in my book, I have used your people in the rainmaking chapter. I've used Kamba people. The fact that your rainmaking prioritizes both genders is already Ubuntu. Ubuntu is about balance. Ubuntu does not want to see imbalance. So Ubuntu will not espouse a gender over another. Ubuntu will not espouse the ill treatment of children just because they are powerless and they are children. So people who say we don't have Ubuntu, what are you saying? What do you have? Because there is no African culture that does not espouse humanity.
Exactly. Thank you. This is such a blessing to have you here. I personally, I wish I had a ticket today to come and stay with you in South Africa for a few weeks because I need to be fed and you're feeding me. And I need some healing, and this is healing. So, but I will be grateful for this moment, and I will take it. Oladele, I don't know if you have another question.
Just before he goes, Ubuntu is also, you know, for us, Nguni people in South Africa, and I think for all South Africans actually, we do this when we go to the altar, but we also do this when we meet each other, or we do this, we call it upapata. That's like when they do namaste, the Indians, and we are losing it. So I am training myself to consciously do this for thank you, because when we do this, it is a concept of Ubuntu, my brother. It says, don't thank me, thank my ancestors, because I am because they were.
And
So this means not me, but them that carry me, or those that I carry. So it defocuses from your self-centeredness. That's why whenever I speak and people say, oh, we are grateful to you, oh, you have such knowledge, I say, no, I'm just a person like all of you. It's the
thank you.
ancestors in me that have that knowledge. So we do this.
Yeah.
That's still a sign, continuation of how Ubuntu is practiced. That's why I said spirituality is in the culture.
It's not only the ancestors, but it's every human that you've touched, and every human through spirit too, not
Togos,
necessarily physically,
Togos,
has touched you.
Togos.
So, and I'm doing this too recently. I was in a room earlier on today where they were saying, Duku, you're a leader, blah, 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 all these good things. And yes, I can say thank you, but because I am intentionally saying no to Western culture, I cannot say thank you, because it is not just thanks to me, it's thanks to everyone who I have
Yes,
encountered, every book
yes.
I have read, every pain I have encountered. It's not just the good. The
Mm.
pain also has contributed to who I am today. So we have to learn, and this goes back to that individualism. You might be driving your Maserati, but you did not get that Maserati by yourself. I don't care how much you want to
Yes.
sit here and talk about how hard you worked and give us
Mm.
advice on how
Mm.
much you made your money. You did not make it by yourself, no matter what you.
Yes. Yes. So next time, my sister, when they do that and you don't have the time to say, no, not me, just do this.
Okay,
That's why the culture is important, my brother.
I'll do.
Because when we do this, we know already when you do this that we are saying to the ancestors, to those that walked before me, and correctly, as you added, to everyone that has made me who I am. Because Zulu people again have an idiom. They say, "Awunyiwanga isihlahla," you were not shed by a tree, meaning you were born into a family, into a community, into a culture that has made you who you are.
I was also going to observe as you were doing it. You have seen several times African women mostly, but Africans in general, even men, they do that even in their dance.
Mm,
We are very
mm,
expressive with our hands, and I've noticed
mm.
a distinct difference between Western culture and African culture.
Yes,
And
yes,
it's interesting, no matter how hard they have tried to take us away from our culture because of how strong it has
mm,
remained in us.
yes, yes. Even this that they have made, calling it a praying hands, it's actually a sign of being grateful. It's part of African spirituality. So when I'm extremely tired and I go to bed and I don't have time to do the elaborate libations and whatever, I just do this and they understand I'm done. I'm just like saying, thank you.
Wow.
Thank you.
My sister,
Um,
you know what? Let's Undoko, have you wanna say anything?
I'm looking through my questions. Oh, I don't know if you want to get into the other questions or you still want to dwell on the topic and not.
Yeah, it's just this Ubuntu thing because I'm heavy on it at the moment, and you helped me explain exactly where
Mhm.
my spirit's taking me. You actually are helping me, and I'm loving what you're saying, and thank you for being here. I speak to people, and this Ubuntu people say, but we're losing this because basically we seem to be doing all these evil to ourselves.
Mm, mm,
Where's the spirit of Ubuntu in us if we are self-loathing, self-hate, and we do all these things? Where's Ubuntu in all this? My
mm.
sister, do have we seem to have lost that? How can we get it back?
What we are doing right now is getting it back. My husband normally says, getting back to the core of who we were is like dealing with an elephant. You, it's huge when you look at it, and it can be very defeating to want to take on the whole elephant as an individual, as a podcast. So as Alkebulan. So what you do is you say, I'm staying by the ear. I'll tear the ear off of this elephant. Someone will say, I'm dealing with the hoof of it. Someone will say, I'm at the neck of it. So that's why she correctly emphasized when I said, when we do this, we acknowledge the people from whom we've come. And she said, and all the human beings that made you. So all our efforts need to come together towards a singular purpose. And I think we are losing Ubuntu because that's, and I'm borrowing this again from my husband, it's his language. There's no singleness of purpose amongst the people, but it is systemic, it's structural. They give us agendas that decoy us, if I can borrow this and use it as a verb, that decoy us from the essence of what should be. So it was Russia, Ukraine. So we were all getting, with that, and we were choosing sides, and it's not a war. Who cares? And then now it's Israel and Palestine, and it's Israel and it's Gaza, and we are running with that also.
Thank you
And
for
hear
saying
me
this.
well. I'm not saying Palestinians should die. As a person who suffered under apartheid, I would be the last person to say that. I wouldn't. As for Russia, it's a topic on its own. But I can tell you up front that that war, the United States is written all over it. And
Yes.
people are not being told the truth. But I'll leave it at that.
We know
for
that. If you know, you
so,
know.
So we are losing Ubuntu because the singleness of purpose is not there. If we had many of these podcasts, if we had many of these speaking engagements, if we had many of what my sister is doing, we are now trying to teach African languages. If we all knew that our end state is to decolonize, it would all work together for good. I think the dilemma of why we are losing Ubuntu is where they have put us. I use two phrases that I like: misinformation, meaning there's an element of truth. Disinformation is 100% pure organic lies. Run away from it. So they're using both. The first disinformation they've given us, my sister, is that Africa is free. Every African country has a Freedom Day where you celebrate, you hoist your flag. Ours is 27 April. And I'm just like, how is this possible? Have you ever thought about this? We went to bed on the 26th of April, 1994, as not a democratic free country. And we woke up that day and it was declared. Ghana in 1957 followed the same pattern. How is it that colonialism started around 1400? And then in 1960, it takes overnight for you to be free?
Without violence.
Colonialism was a system, a process, a journey. How is it that this journey to decolonize does not happen? You just move from being colonized to being uncolonized. Where's the journey to decolonize? It's not there. So we are losing Ubuntu because we haven't decolonized. And we haven't decolonized, we continue to live as individuals, which is not Ubuntu. We continue to live as self-centered people, which is not Ubuntu. We continue to prioritize European languages over ours, which is not Ubuntu. We continue to prioritize religion over spirituality, which is not Ubuntu. So it's dying because as a people, we are still on a plantation. My brother, the only thing that has changed is the whip no longer comes as brutal as it did come. In fact, the whip, they no longer call people to come and see you being whipped. They whip you in private. So nobody's witnessing it. So nothing has changed. So people who say we are losing Ubuntu, I'm always like, when did we regain it in the first place for us to lose it? It's not us who killed it. It was killed for us. We are on a journey to reclaim it. So when you say we are losing it, we are talking as if it's always been there and we are the ones who are foregoing it. Voluntarily. No, we are actually fighting for it to survive because it was killed. We were taught to be individuals.
Yeah.
Wow. Okay, I was going to ask some questions here, actually. Can
I
I ask a
have
question?
one more before you go. Are you going to the audience?
Yeah, I'm going to the audience because of time. Yeah.
Quickly, before we go to the community, I have one question because I do want to give back to Mama Khanyisile because she has given to us. And I'm going to do it the long way. So our revolution, this reclaiming of Ubuntu. That's what I'm going to call the revolution moving forward. The reclaiming of Ubuntu is usually led by givers. People like you and I who, no matter how little we have, we're always putting time. And many others, our brother Oladile, always putting time. I am currently jobless, but I am here struggling and pushing
Makes the
to
two
build,
of us.
right? To build a company and saying, no, we can still do this. Feeding I have Africans reaching out to me, we need help with this, figuring out how I can help them without money because I don't have it, but connecting them to other people. So always giving, always giving. And the community a lot of times does not give back to these givers because they're so individualistic right now, given the current state of our African minds, right? You see it in Dr. King, you see it in Lumumba, you see it in Ida B. Wells. They were all lonely and abandoned. They all came to a realization that the community was not given, but they still gave. So
Yes.
I want to stop that. I want to bring Ubuntu back in that relationship. How does the community give back to the givers who are serving them? And I know as a giver, that's going to be hard, but step out of your shoes and think and have that answer, because the community needs to get that answer so that they can start giving.
I have never really talked about this, but I think it's the first thing that came to my mind when you asked. So, because I'm ex-MK, we were called the non-statutory forces because we were not a defense force of a country. So upon integration, we were mixed with the old SADF, the racist SADF coming into one. I first went to, so that process started in 94. I first went to UCT, got my undergrad and my honors, so I only integrated in 97. So I started at UCT in 93. So when I got there, I realized that everyone they called non-statutory force, except really, I think about 4 or 5 or 6 people, don't remember the correct number, of people I was with in the Bush MK had been made into officers, because in the defense force, they are officers and they are non-commissioned officers. So it boggled my mind. I was just like, how do you do that? And the reason I was given was because they don't have experience. And I'm thinking, but they're already non-statutory force. So they have some defense force experience, even if it was not a statutory force. But for officers' course in Gordons Bay, we take people from the street, and after a year, we can give them a rank. So what's so difficult, except it's just pure racism, or maybe someone just didn't care. So I instituted a whole process of what was called the appeal boards, where people were given their ranks, backdates with money. It was a huge thing. And I think I angered the racist of the day that existed there. And then things started happening, and there was a backlash against me later on. I was told, you did this, you stole a laptop, you beat this person up. It was a very lonely period. And I think out of my own anger, I just resigned. And I was just like, this is beneath me. I've done my part anyway. Let me go somewhere else. Now you ask, what should the community do? It was a lonely time. I can even tell you, of all those people that I helped, I don't think even 2% stood with me at the time, or would even call and say, how are you doing? So we know that the community is not called like you are, and they might not have the resources that you might have at the time. But a simple call. I think capitalism has made us think that support is finance.
Yeah.
The greatest support you can give anyone actually is emotional support, because money comes and go. But yeah, I didn't get that. It was a very lonely time. So I think I thought I wanted to answer this with a practical example. And I've never really talked about this. As I say, I find it hard to talk about myself because I think it's a waste of time. There's so much to talk about of our own spirituality or history or culture. So in that way, I think the emotional support. I've read Lumumba's last letter to his wife before he was killed. Where were the Congolese, guys? People always say, oh, but at that time, the colonialist was doing this. If we're always going to have excuses for why we don't support our leaders, guys, then Bob Marley's right. In Redemption Song, how long shall we keep quiet as our leaders are being killed right, left, and center? Where were Burkinabe people when Thomas Sankara was killed, guys? There was no revolution. There was no uprising for everything that he had done for them. There was no uprising that said, Blaise Compaore, we don't care if the French put you in power. You are not going to rule us, not under our watch.
Yeah.
So I think, yeah, the community is very crucial. Otherwise, we will not have leaders, fellow Africans, because our leaders will just be scared. And I always say this to people, and I say, when you ask an African president to do the right thing, we are actually asking them to sign a death warrant.
Yes.
Shall we be there because they first come against you with their media, they demonize you and reduce you to nothing. You become a swear word, so that by the time they kill you or take you out, we have been desensitized
No
because
one
they
cares. Yeah.
demonized you. Nobody cares. We expect it anyway. Where are we when those things happen, community? We don't stand with our leaders. You think that we would have taken George Bush to the International Criminal Court for what he had done in Iraq, reducing a whole country to stone age based on a lie on weapons of mass destruction that were never found? Do you think we would have dared to take him to the ICC? Republicans would stand with him, or Democrats, or whoever, because sometimes you no longer even know which one is which. The policies are the same. They would have
Exactly.
stood with him. He would not have been lonely. But an African leader, they deal with you and we all watch on. In fact, worse so, we even join the propaganda that we are given against you. That's the dilemma of being a leader of Africans. It's tough.
Exactly.
Wow.
Oladele,
Yeah.
before we go, and now directly to you, Mama Khanyisile, what can we, your community, because we are, because we have our African consciousness, and we don't need anyone to tell us, are you Mama Khanyisile's cousin? Are you her friend? How do you know her? No, she is my family. I am her family. She is my blood. I am her blood. Be quiet and move to your. How can we give back to you? What need do you have right now that is burning that we can give back to you?
I need to publish my book. And let me tell you, the art industry, the capitalist Western art industry, because that's what it is, that's the culture they've given all of us, is so rotten and so self-centered that people unashamedly will give you 2% rights over your work, and
Right.
the rest of the 88 is with somebody else. So I never understood. In South Africa, they say such and such an artist is dead. There's no money to bury them. Let's put money together. I always used to say, it's not my problem. Shawariako. This person was so famous. How is it that they don't have money? The day I finished my book, that's 2 years ago, and that's like 4 to 5 years of research. And I went back pre-colonially as far as 1,000 years BCE to craft what was African gender. The day I did the tour from Kenyan universities to Namibian to South African, until I went to University of South Africa, UNISA, and they said, guess what? We give the highest rights. And I said, how much? They said 13%, take it or leave it, because others give 3%, 4%, and they're not lying. I've been offered 6%, 5%. This is my work. Now, if you are desperate, you'll take it. I decided I rather keep it on the shelf. It will gather dust, but I'm not doing it. I can't self-publish at the moment because I need money to do so, and I'm paying university fees. So it's gathering dust. So for me, that's the immediate need that I have. That book needs to go out because I just know how many people it's going to assist.
So, Olade, I don't know if you want to speak to it, Oladile.
Yeah, my sister. And that's one of the reasons why I wanted you to come on here so we can put this out there. It's very important because we had this conversation, and when we had the conversation, it hit my heart. And I'm thinking, with that kind of knowledge, we need to share it. And with what you spoke about today and everything you've given us today, people need to hear more. And like you said, when we get in these kind of spaces, we're basically doing the work. And your
Mm,
words will enrich, empower, and enlighten and wake up a lot more minds. So, my community people, like my sister said, my sister needs to get a book out there. So, if you're a publisher, self-publishing, and we need to help her to get this out there. It's not about making money all the time.
mm.
It's capitalism that's making you want to screw somebody over to make money. Excuse my language. We're a community. There's ways we can help. So please, I'm speaking to everybody who's listening today. If you're a publisher out there, whatever way you can help my sister, please let's reach out to us, please.
And
Thank you
to
very
get
much.
and to
Um,
get even more direct, right? To get even more direct, because this solution we're gonna have it now, not tomorrow. We're not
Yes,
gonna wait for publishers. We found a publisher, an African publisher. Mama Khanyisile is going to get the quote. We will take
yeah,
that quote and we will put out a fundraiser. And
that's
you,
it. Yeah,
community, are going to help us raise that money to publish that book. That book will be
fantastic.
published by us, all of us together.
So
Togos.
this is probably gonna be one of our first projects to actually raise money for my sister to publish her book. So guys, I'm gonna be putting it out there. We're gonna open an account and we're gonna get the funds that she needs to publish a book. And I'm gonna hold every one of us accountable to this, guys. If you follow the Imagine Alkebulan, we say Ubuntu. It's time to show Ubuntu.
Yes.
Come
Okay,
up.
It's all
thank you.
yours, Oladile.
Yeah. Okay, I've just got one question here. I'm going to ask you, my sister, and then we can round up. The question comes. I'm just going to put it on the screen,
Mhm.
and it
Hey,
says,
let me wear my glasses
"Okay,
also.
can you see, or do you want me to read it?"
You can read it.
Okay. It says, "Why is it so difficult to embrace African spirituality? Is it because we are brainwashed to believe it's an evil practice?"
The
That's my wife,
person
but that's my wife, by the way.
the person who asked that question has answered the same question that they've asked. For 1,400 years, 14 centuries, we have been told that if you don't embrace Jesus, you are demonic. We've been told that you will not relate with God except through Jesus. We've been told that He is the author and finisher of our faith. We have been told that if you die and you do not die in Christ, woe unto you because you are going to burn. Have you ever tore apart the word eternal, never ending, fire of brimstone, and I don't know what?
It haunts me every now and then.
It's scary.
Yep.
It is really scary. So and people in religion fight me when I say this, but I put it to you as lawyers say. A lot of people who are in religion are stuck there because of the fear of going to hell than out of loving God. Because I think for a lot of them, they know God has not done, excuse my language, but for the young people listening, especially the Gen Zs, this is their language. So we are speaking to them. Not because Jesus has done shit to them. Nothing. Nothing. They can't even afford tea with milk. They are standing in the street and telling you how much God loves you. They haven't eaten. You look at this person and you realize, I must take my last 20 rands and buy them a pie or a sandwich. They haven't eaten. So, what keeps them there? It's fear. Religion is based on fear. That's why an important thing we didn't talk about, I'm glad your wife asked this question. An important thing we didn't talk about when we unpacked what is African spirituality is that we don't proselytize. For people who don't know what that word means, we don't evangelize, we don't recruit. We believe you are born with it, it's in you. No African society in the history of Africans, and we are the first race on earth, has ever gone to war because other people slaughter a goat and others slaughter a lamb, because others do this and others do this. We have never attacked anybody based on spirituality, but religion has always and will always, and are doing it even now, attacking each other based on how the others believe. So we don't embrace African spirituality, firstly, because we come to it with a mentality of religion. You are looking for the Pope, the bishop, the pastor to guide you. No, it comes from here. People always say to me, okay, I've heard you. Now that I've heard you, tell me, how do I get to my home altar in Samo? And I talk and I say, I would be giving you the catechism. That's not how it works here. Go and sit there and then just start talking whatever comes to your mouth. Your ancestors are real. They are listening. They will show up. And as you do it frequently, you'll get to a point where you've refined it, where you even know and feel them when you're not even sitting Msamo. It's not liturgy. So that's the first thing. You come here expecting a pastor, a bishop, and a priest. They are not there. You come here expecting the Genesis to Revelation book, it's not there. It's creative application. You come here expecting assurances that if I'm in African spirituality, I'm going to be blessed and it will double. So say your people, my brother, it will come in double. No. The double here shall not come because you have knelt, because you have given your life to Christ. It will come in your activating ubuntu, in the process of you giving from what you don't have, as my sister was saying. So it's hard to embrace this because it is so different from religion. They are like this. One is facing north, one is facing south. The two don't meet. That's why it's so hard. And religion has been drummed into us so much that it's almost like you have to unbelieve to embrace African spirituality. But here's the important part. It's hard to embrace it because it's not fashionable. You don't hear an NBA person win whatever it is they win and say, oh, I thank my ancestors. They're always thanking Jesus. So it's not fashionable. That's one. Two, it's not on TV. Three, it's not reinforced. It's not Christmas and Easter. It's not Ramadan. It's not reinforced. Are you aware that in all African countries, I have to say this to your community because it's global, the only thing good the ANC did in my eyes, ANC is the African National Congress. The only good thing they did is we have allowed African spirituality to open parliament. You know, there is no single African country where African spirituality can officiate over the opening of parliament because it's deemed demonic. It's either Islam or Christianity. We are the only country where you can do that. We are the only country where you can force your employer and say, I'm going through a process of uktwasa, which is initiation, which is a calling, those who have to go through it, and I need to take leave against that. So it's not fashionable. It's not systemic. It's not structural. It's a very lonely journey. That's why you have to find like-minded people. That's why our ancestors of Africa must bless you for the podcast that we are having, because you are telling someone who's going through that journey right now that we are not alone. We are there. So those are all the reasons why it's hard to embrace it.
Okay,
but
thank you, my
also
sister.
this just quickly, this born again cheap doctrine has made it even more harder. This doctrine of blessings has made it harder. People hold on to Christianity because truly they believe that microwave form of Christianity is an answer to their lives. So in spirituality, we don't give you those promises. We want you to walk through the pain. We want you to experience it all, because that's what makes you who you are at the end, on the other end of the journey.
Thank you, my sis. Thank you for that. We're just running up now because I'm cognizant of your time. Our last speaker was on here. Unduku did host the show. And my sister did ask the last speaker, Verena Conway, about a question for you. Because basically it's a tradition on our podcast where we ask the last speaker to leave a question for the next speaker. She didn't know who was going to be on, but the question she sent, I was listening in. And the moment I heard that question, I'm thinking, wow. And I call this our spiritual platform. Trust me, because it just linked into the person who is going to come onto the show today. So the question is, my sister, what is your strategy for helping Africans on earth remember that they are gods?
I think I first leave it. And I think wherever I go, I cannot not talk about the spirituality. I don't care what topic I'm given. And wherever I go, I cannot not mention that patriarchy is not African, because we need to get peace into the African household. These gender power relations, we never had them. That's a Western thing, or maybe an Arab thing. We never had gender power relations. We had gender relations, and those were based on what each gender specialized in, job specialization, really. So I'm doing my part, but I can't do my part alone. You are doing it too. She's doing it. Everybody's doing it. Everybody who's standing here and saying we were Ubuntu people, everybody who's standing here and saying we were spiritual people and not religious people, we are already reminding Africans who they were, that we were gods. That's why I started by saying we don't have a god in the conceptualization of religion. Because, for instance, the African woman was called a procreator, so they were creator too. The men had their own role, in terms of how they dealt with hunting, how they were gods in that area. So I think I borrow it from the Christian song, sadly, that says, right in the corner where you are. It cannot be the task of one person. Africa alone, we are how many now? What's the
One,
total?
1.3 billion.
Yes, I know, because we grew 1.3 billion. That's Africa alone. There's diaspora too. Now imagine if that task falls on one person. That time we are fighting a whole system of Christmas and Easter.
Right.
That's on television, of Ramadan. So it cannot be the job of a singular person. So I want you on your podcast also, if that's permissible. Maybe whenever you start your podcast and when you end your podcast, always dedicate 2 minutes or so to remind Africans that you are pure. You came from great ancestors. You built the pyramids. You come from greatness. African women, you are not the beguiled and the beguiler. You are sacred. You are procreators, with the originator. We need to drum those messages into Africans to a point where they believe them. Because at the moment, my brother, the philosophy of the Bloods and the Cribs is speaking louder than you and me right now. A 13-year-old African American is hearing the gangsters more than they are hearing us. So we need to multiply these voices also. We need podcasts that give birth to other podcasts.
Yeah.
You're speaking to my spirit, and it's done. We're gonna keep doing this. It's basically what you're saying there just tells me that what we're doing here is needed. And
It's
I
it's
always say to my
direly
sister,
needed.
yeah, it's a spiritual journey for us. It's just not within, it's a spiritual journey for us. And thank for affirming that to us. Thank you very much. Undergo, I'm just gonna round up. Anything else you want to say before I ask the question?
I am grateful. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Okay, I'm gonna ask you, my sister,
Hmm.
for our next guest. What question would you like to pose to our next guest, please? What would you like to ask him to ask? What question would you like for them?
I would like to ask them how we are going to get together to deal with the doctrine of gangsterism in our communities. It really sits me off the wrong way. There's a movie called American Son. Yes, it just lays bare how much our voices are mulled. They are not louder than the voices that are out there. So how are we going to get together to make our voices bigger than the voice of the gangster and the criminal? Because we are losing our young people to those two voices currently. And if we don't have the youth, what then do we have? They're supposed to be leaders of tomorrow. So if you don't have the youth, it's not just in America. I know we profile the Bloods and the Crips. It's not just in America. It's in South Africa. It's in every country you go to. If they are not sucked in by Boko Haram, they are sucked in by some other rebel movement. If it's not the rebel movement, it's pure criminal, gangster crime or whatever. So what are we going to do to get together?
Yeah.
To raise our voices above those voices.
And
Thank
you
you very
see how
much for that.
fitting this is, Oladile. You see how fitting this is to the next guest.
It
You
actually
see
is.
how fitting
It's
this
Who's
is.
the next guest?
We'll tell you when we get off.
we'll tell you. We normally keep it secret, but don't
Yeah,
worry.
All right.
we'll tell you when we get off air. When we stop going live.
We'll tell you.
Unbelievable.
Okay. Yeah. Wow.
Come
Wow.
on,
I don't.
Togos.
Yes. Yes.
Thank you very much. Okay.
Togos.
I would just like to sum this up, guys. There's not much I can say based after what my sister's given us. We've been fed, and this is for me. This is the spiritual space. This is where we need to be at. Uh, unapologetic about the Church of Mosque. I'm sorry, those things that they don't feed us. All they do is just move us away from ourselves. This is Ubuntu. We need to be Ubuntu. I am because you are because I am. And this is who we are. And this is what we need to manifest. My sister, really thank you for your time. This has been empowering, enlightening. It's been great. So thank you very much for your time. And Nduku, anything else you want to say to our sister?
Look out for the fundraiser, y'all. I will be hitting you up. If you want to be saying anything to me, I'll be like, did you put some money? Listen, I am someone with no job, but I know I'll put $5 in there. So anything you have, put in there so that we can get that book published. And we will, by September, let's say that, right?
Yeah,
So that we
let's
give
get a
ourselves
deadline.
a goal. By September, we'll be having a review talking about the book and how much it sold. I know Jumuiya Yanguza Saba is going to be going to bookstores to make sure it's sold and that they carry it. So, yes.
Okay, so the final words. This is our task, guys. We need to get our sister, our mother, our spiritual mother on the shelves. Basically, our thirst needs to be shared. If we say we care, this is how we pull together and make things happen. Because for so long, we've been so individual because they've made it individualistic. It's about time we practice Ubuntu. Thank you everybody for listening, and my sisters, thanks for sharing your time with us. Okay, and we'll be back soon next month for the next one, but we'll be letting you know who that person is. So speak to you soon. Thank you very much, everybody.
Kwaherini.
Bye.